Congratulations. You've just woken up in 15th century Castile, and that odd warmth on your face isn't sunlight, it's goat breath. Again, you blink against the smoky haze inside your one-room home, which is less a house and more a collection of damp sticks and accidental holes pretending to be shelter. The floor is dirt, the walls are mud, and the roof leaks everything except mercy. Your mattress is a pile of straw that's been thoroughly colonized by lice, and your pillow is a burlap sack that smells vaguely of wet sheep and human failure. You sit up and immediately regret it. Your spine creaks like a church door, and something sharp, possibly a chicken, possibly a demon, scurries out from under the bed. It's cold, it always is. You reach for your tunic, which is damp, itchy, and exactly the same one you've worn every day for the last 3 winters. Laundry, in your village, is a ritual performed once per pope. Outside, the church bell tolls. You hear it every morning. It's not a call to joy. It's a reminder you're still here, and God is still watching. Closely toasely dot Spain, or what's becoming Spain is newly united. Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile are now king and queen of your life, your land, and your eternal soul. You're told it's a glorious time, a divine partnership blessed by the heavens. But from where you're standing, ankle deep in chicken droppings, it mostly just feels drafty. The Holy Inquisition is in full swing, and the fires are never quite out. Accusations of heresy travel faster than carts. One wrong word, one unlucky neighbor with a grudge, and you'll be dragged before a robed man with too much incense and not enough patience. They ask questions. You scream answers. Then, usually, more fire. You try not to have opinions or expressions. Your neighbors disappear. Jews are expelled. Muslims are hunted. Converts are eyed with suspicion. You say your prayers loudly now. In Latin you don't understand, just to be safe. Your meals are a work of minimalist horror. Breakfast is beans, if you're lucky. Lunch is also beans, but colder. Dinner, imaginative bean interpretations, occasionally flavored with despair. Bread exists, but it's more of a theory than a staple. You've named the family goat's sustenance, and you often stare at her thighs with quiet hunger at the market. Someone whispers about a Genoese madman, Cristobal Colon, who claims there's another world across the sea. He's begging the Queen for ships. Most people laugh. The idea that there's anything west of the ocean but sea monsters and the edge of the earth is absurd. You don't care. You're more concerned with the infected goat bite festering on your shin. Still, something is happening. The old order is dying. The Reconquista is wrapping up in the south. The last Muslim stronghold, Granada, is being surrounded. The church is emboldened. The crown is consolidating power. And though you can't read, you feel it in the wind change. Big, dangerous, ship sailing, heretic burning change. But you just want clean water, warm bread, and for your cousin to stop snoring directly into your face. You're 30, which makes you elderly by local standards. Your teeth are mostly dreams. Now your knees ache, and every day you wake up thinking, surely it can't get worse. Spoiler, it does. And soon you'll be part of an empire, whether you want to or not. So pull on your lice-ridden tunic, say your prayers loudly, and try not to be noticed. Welcome to Catholic Spain, 1490, a land of purity, punishment, and promises you'll never benefit from. And yes, it's still only morning. You've traded your dirt floor and goat-infested village for something worse. A ship, Congratulations, you're now a sailor in 1492, which means you're malnourished, poorly paid, and deeply seasick. You sleep beside rats and pray to avoid storms, starvation, and sudden execution. Your ship is less of a vessel and more of a wooden coffin. To Santa Maria, or Nina, or whichever death trap you've boarded, smells like rotting wood, sweat, and salted despair. The food is biscuits, not the fluffy kind. These are called hardtack, a culinary experiment in fossilization. They're so full of weevils, they sometimes wiggle. You bite carefully, not to avoid bugs, but to protect your few remaining teeth. You drink water, gone sour days ago, or wine that now tastes like vinegar and foot below deck. It's dark, cramped, and damp. You sleep between cargo barrels and the corpse of a man no one's had the courage to throw overboard yet. There's no privacy, no peace, just the endless sound of waves, creaking wood, and someone vomiting loudly into a bucket. It's probably you, and all this to find a shortcut to Asia, or so you're told. But instead of silk and spices, you stumble onto a string of lush islands that no map recognizes. Columbus calls it the New World. The locals call it home. You call it hot, humid, and full of bugs with wings the size of your hand. At first it feels like paradise. Palms, beaches, fruit that doesn't taste like sadness. But it doesn't take long before the sickness sets in. Not the fever comes later. This is gold fever. Your commanders see shiny trinkets in native hands and immediately decide they've found El Dorado. Suddenly, your job description changes. You're no longer a sailor. You're a conquistador, which is Spanish for man with a rusty sword and a questionable moral compass. You march through jungles in armor that rusts when you look at it wrong. You wade through rivers, lose your boots, and gain a thriving colony of intestinal parasites. You get bitten by things science hasn't named yet. You sweat through your tunic until it fuses to your skin. Diarrhea becomes a way of life. Now you're with Hernan Courts, a man with ambition, a burning stare, and the diplomatic skills of a bull in a church. He burns the ships. Literally, so retreat isn't an option. You're going to conquer the Aztecs or die trying. Mostly, you'll die trying. You trek through the Mexican highlands, gasping thin air, muttering half-formed prayers, and eating hardtack that now includes jungle mold for flavor. You arrive in Tenochtitlan, a city so grand it makes Toledo look like a pigsty. You're awestruck. Then the killing starts. Diplomacy is a brief experiment. Then it's swords, fire, and smallpox. The Aztec Empire collapses under a storm of European steel, disease, and betrayal. You cough blood and step over corpses to collect gold. Some of the bodies are your friends. Some were just trying to feed their children. It doesn't matter. The crown wants treasure. You want to go home. You fill your ship with stolen wealth, broken idols, and rumors of even bigger empires deeper inland. You are sunburned, infected, exhausted, and rich, at least on paper. Back in Spain, they'll sing songs of your conquest. They won't mention the part where you lost 3 fingers, buried your brother in a swamp, or wept in the rain, clutching a gold necklace and a dysentery-ridden gut. You helped launch an empire at the cost of a continent, and the worst part, you haven't even made it to the Andes yet. You always dreamed of escaping the village. You imagined velvet coats, golden goblets, and polite applause instead. You wake up sweating in a government office built halfway up the Andes, wearing a moth-eaten uniform and bleeding from the shoulder, because someone mistook you for a tax collector. Which is fair. You are welcome to Lima, capital of Spain's empire in the New World, and possibly the most exhausting job in human history. You're here to administer, collect taxes, enforce the king's divine will, balance ledgers written in chicken blood. You work under a man who believes he was personally chosen by God to oversee drainage ditches and grain tariffs. He speaks in Latin. You nod and pretend you understand. Every day you wake up to the sound of coughing yours, or someone else's, and the shriek of donkeys. You trudge down cobbled alleys ankle-deep in filth, trying to make it to the treasury, building before some disgruntled miner stabs you again. Your boots are damp, always. They never dry. You've accepted this. So have your toes, which now resemble pale, blistered grapes. Spain is rich, unimaginably rich. Ships full of gold and silver sail home every month. In Madrid, the king builds palaces with chandeliers made of imported crystal and carpets woven by monks who forgot joy. The royal court drowns in luxury. You meanwhile haven't been paid in 3 months and live above a butcher whose pigs scream all night. The smell of rotting meat mixes with candle smoke and mildew. It's the official scent of the Spanish Empire, sanctified decay. Your job, besides surviving food poisoning, is to squeeze every last coin from the locals. You manage encomiendas, sprawling estates, where indigenous people are entrusted to work under Spanish supervision. You've read the laws. They sound merciful on parchment. They look a lot more like slavery in person. You ride out to the mines once a week. It's not a pleasant journey. The mountains try to kill you at every step. Landslides, bandits, hypothermia, God's disinterest. The wind up here can slice through wool, bone, and hope. The mines are worse. Apatosi, they dig silver from the belly of the earth. Children with sunken eyes drag carts of ore up tunnels, so narrow even rats reconsider. The air smells of sweat, ash, and silence. 1 million coins worth of silver flows out of this mountain, and it's paved with bodies. You write the reports, adjust the numbers, file everything in triplicate, then pour yourself a drink and try not to think about anything. Rumors begin to drift in from the coast. Dutch ships attacking Spanish vessels, Protestant pirates, heretics with cannonballs and bad manners. You're ordered to cut spending, so you cancel a shipment of blankets. The men in the mines will simply have to be cold this year. Your uniform itches constantly. The wool is coarse. The lining has fleas. Your conscience itches more. You spend evenings staring into the candlelight, wondering if your soul still counts. If you never really meant to be cruel, you just needed a job. You write a letter home to your mother, telling her you've been promoted. You don't mention the stabbing. By the end of the decade, Spain controls half the world, but the prices are rising. Inflation spirals. Gold makes your empire powerful and also brittle. A gilded blade still rusts. You file another report. Your ink has dried out. You use wine. Tomorrow, the mines will demand more, and you'll keep taking, because the empire never sleeps, and neither do the dead. Congratulations, you've been promoted. You're no longer a bureaucrat behind a desk. Now you're a soldier, a proud defender of Spain's vast and crumbling empire, and you haven't eaten in 2 days. Philip II is dead. His empire, once so rich it blinded itself on gold, has been left to his heirs, along with a generous helping of debt, unpaid troops, and an entire navy that mostly exists in paintings. You are shipped to Flanders. They don't tell you why. You just go. The Netherlands are rebelling again. Protestant heretics, independents, some nonsense about taxes and freedom. All you know is you're marching through mud with a wooden musket that misfires more than it shoots, in boots that stopped being waterproof when your toes fell through the bottom. You sleep in wet tents. Or don't. Sometimes you dig a hole and sleep in that. You chew on bark, boil leather straps, and once tried to eat a candle. Didn't go well. Your rations are dry peas, moldy bread, and the occasional rat if you're lucky enough to catch one, before the others do. It rains, always. The fields are drowning. Your socks haven't been dry since Antwerp, and every morning the freezing wind reminds you that chivalry is dead, God is busy, and you're just one bad cough away from the grave. The Dutch are good at war. They have windmills and gunpowder, Protestant fury. You, on the other hand, have a paper IOU from the crown and a rusty sword that doubles as a shovel. You lose teeth in Germany, where someone's idea of diplomacy involves artillery and accidental poisonings. You lose your mind in Flanders after watching a friend bleed out in a ditch over the right to wear a cross in public. You start hearing things at night, hoofbeats, prayers, rats sharpening knives. You keep them to yourself. Then there's the sea. You remember hearing tales of the Spanish Armada. Glorious, unstoppable, a floating fortress. What they don't mention is the fire ships. The English loaded merchant ships with pitch, lit them on fire, and sent them straight into the fleet like flaming battering rams. You watched from the cliffs as the invincible navy turned to burning driftwood. Spain still claims half the world, from Manila to Mexico, but it feels like a lie. Back in Madrid, the king draws maps in gold leaf. Here, in the mud, you trade rosaries for dry boots and pray to whoever's listening that your musket doesn't explode in your hands. Pay. Delayed medical treatment, mostly whiskey and sawdust. If you're wounded, you're patched up by a man whose last job was shoeing horses. If you lose a limb, you get a blessing and a pat on the back. Maybe a medal if someone important was watching. Your commander is half mad and fully drunk. He gives long speeches about God and empire while gnawing on a stolen ham. You nod, because nodding is safer than honesty. And yet, the banners still fly. The coins still bear the Habsburg face. The priests still preach that Spain is God's chosen. Sword, you march even when your stomach growls louder than your war cry. You wonder, sometimes, what it's like to be the enemy. Do Dutch soldiers also chew on moss and dream of soup? Probably. You survive another skirmish. You wrap a frozen hand around your musket, and you march again, because Spain isn't finished collapsing yet, and neither are you. You're finally home, not in the safe and sound sense, just geographically closer to where you started. A crooked village tucked into the Spanish hills, one church, 3 goats, and a population steadily declining by the hour. You've survived wars, debt, frostbite, and one poorly stitched musket wound. Now you survive mostly through wine, superstition, and cabbage, boiled so long it forgets it was once a plant. The empire still exists, technically, but it wheezes. You tend to olive trees. They don't yield much. No one buys olives anymore, or anything, really. Inflation turned coin into theater. You trade a basket of fruit for a spool of thread and call it economics. The village priest has gone mostly deaf. Confession now consists of shouting sins into his good ear and hoping he doesn't forget to absolve you, Spain. Once the hammer of God is a little rusty now. The silver stopped flowing like it used to. The mines are drying up. The colonies are restless. France is flexing. The pirates off the coast aren't even dramatic anymore. They just show up, take what they want, and leave before lunch. The king, well, that's a conversation. Charles II sits on the throne, or leans, really, the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, and possibly the most cursed. Centuries of inbreeding have reduced him to a soft-spoken, drooling heirloom who cannot chew properly and governs with the steady intellect of a damp sponge. He's got the jawline of a melted candle and the health of a haunted turnip. People say he's bewitched. People say a lot of things. You just nod and pour another cup of cheap red wine. It helps with the cough, and the memories, and the fact that half your friends have died of winter. The village is full of ghosts, not the spooky kind, just the quiet ones. Abandoned houses, dry wells, prayers that go unanswered. The children are fewer now. Most people either leave or die. You try not to do either. You remember when Spain ruled the seas, when your commanders barked orders beneath golden banners, and your enemies trembled at the very mention of Castile. Now, France grows bold. Louis XIV struts around calling himself the Sun King, and you've got 3 teeth and a cow that doesn't respect you. Empires have a sound when they die. It's not screaming, it's creaking, like beams in an old house. Every week, a new tax. Salt, wheat, chimney smoke, anything they can measure, they tax. The collectors arrive on mules, scribble something in a ledger, and leave with your firewood. You offer them olives. They laugh. The church bells still ring, but the sounds, thinner now, hollow, like they're announcing something no one believes in anymore. And still, you carry on. Because what else do? You tend your trees. You patch your coat. You tell stories to anyone who still listens about faraway islands, impossible battles, and the time the sea caught fire. Some nights you dream in Latin, though you never learned it. Other nights you dream of silver and blood and boots filling with rain. You wake up sore and alive. Spain, like you, is tired, but not gone, not yet. And so you pull on your boots, feed the chickens, and keep going, creaking, coughing, half remembering, into the glorious decay. You've come back again, lucky you. This time you're a colonial subject, born somewhere dusty and far from Madrid. Maybe Lima, maybe Manila. Doesn't really matter. You're still poor, still ruled by a king you'll never see, and still expected to die for something called Spain. The War of Spanish Succession begins with royal paperwork and ends with rotting bodies. Charles II dies finally and leaves no heir but plenty of confusion. The French and Austrians bicker over who gets to wear the crown, and Spain becomes the battlefield of Europe's family feud. You get another foreign king, this one Bourbon, technically French. Same war, different wig. You still wear the same boots, eat the same dried beans, and march in the name of monarchs who believe your town doesn't exist. By the time the war ends, the empire is bruised, but not dead, not yet. Back home, or rather, in your home, far across the sea, something's brewing. You feel it. In the songs, in the sudden disappearances, in the way your cousin whispers Bolivar's name like a prayer. Revolution is coming. South America burns with rebellion. Bolivar, San Martin, and others who used to write poetry are now marching. With machetes and printing manifestos. You stay quiet, because you've seen what Spain does to rebels. But your neighbors are gone. Your church is empty. Even the governor's house looks nervous. You see red and gold banners fall. One by one, the colonies vanish. Argentina, Venezuela, Peru, Mexico. Places Spain once held like trophies now spit her out like spoiled wine. You hear the gunfire in Cuba. You feel the aftershocks in your teeth. The silence that follows is worse. The empire shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. Now it's 1898. You're guarding a rusted cannon in Manila, sweating through your uniform in the tropical heat, pretending it matters. The Spanish-American War arrives like a bad joke. The Americans show up with steel ships and cameras. You have a donkey and some leftover bullets. They call it a splendid little war. You call it pointless. They bombard the city. The cannon doesn't work. The food's gone. The heat is unbearable. You surrender. No one is surprised. Spain loses Cuba, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, whatever scraps were left. The empire that once circled the globe now fits inside a map no one hangs anymore. There's no grand finale, no heroic last stand. The empire ends not with a bang, but a shrug. And you go home, if you have one, or you build a shack from broken wood and start over. Again the priests still say Spain was chosen by God. The textbooks still call it glorious. But your hands are blistered, your stomach is hollow, and you're fairly certain God hasn't returned your letters. The crown sends someone to give a speech. He wears medals and speaks of pride. You try to stay awake. It's hard. The heat, the hunger, the fatigue of centuries. It all blends together. Once, Spain ruled the world. Now it borrows chairs. You spend your final days sitting in the shade, chewing sugarcane and trying not to think about it. About the silver mines, the burning ships, the useless parades. About how many lifetimes you've served a flag that forgot your name. History marches on. You remain seated. They say it was glorious. You don't argue. You just nod and close your eyes. You're no longer alive. Congratulations. Now you drift bodiless memory without bone, a ghost of the empire. Not a famous one. You weren't a king or a conquistador. You were a starving soldier, a limping farmer, a tax clerk with trench foot, but you were there, through all of it. And now you haunt the aftermath. The empire is gone, all of it. The treasure fleets, the burning galleons, the absurd number of kings named Philip. What's left fits in a textbook footnote or a souvenir shop. You linger in the corners of old cities, Seville, Toledo, Cusco, Manila, watching tourists pose in front of cathedrals you helped build, often at sword point. They hold lattes and selfie sticks. They smile where you once bled. The language remains. Castilian Spanish global now, reshaped, sung through different mouths. It clings to continents like the aftertaste of conquest. But the power, the empire, gone, reduced to signage and Instagram captions. You drift through the museums. They keep a few pieces of you there. Coins, rusty armor, faded maps. One portrait catches your eye. A half-starved peasant in a tattered robe, staring sideways like he's about to bolt. The plaque calls him anonymous laborer. 16th century, that's you. Or close enough. Spain itself survived, sort of. It kept the language, the tapas, the festivals, the football. It reinvented itself after the fall. It leaned into nostalgia, turned blood into heritage. The empire is dust, but the souvenirs are polished. You hover in Madrid as Franco rises, a dictator in a general's cap, trying to freeze history in place. You watch democracy stagger back in afterward, like a drunk relative no one wants to mention. Flags change, faces change, But power, real power, never returns. No one remembers the Inquisition now. It's a tourist joke, a Monty Python sketch. The burnings, the torture, the whispered betrayals, reduced to punchlines. You float above the old dungeons. The stones remember, but no one asks them. In Latin America, the old wounds itch. Statues fall, flags rise. You see your descendants marching, chanting, reclaiming. You want to join them, but you're just memory now. No mouth, no hands, just a whisper in the cathedral wind. Once you carried gold across oceans. You dug silver from the bones of mountains. You watched kings name themselves divine while you slept in wet boots. You endured because someone told you it was for Spain. For glory don't now. Spain sells t-shirts that say Espaga. The world spins on. The empire is a memory wrapped in myth, cleaned, pressed, and sold in gift shops. You see schoolchildren posing in front of colonial cannons. They giggle. You envy them. They will never know the smell of dysentery in a galleon hold sometimes. In the quiet hours, you drift across the ocean. You pass over empty forts, sunken ships, cities grown fat on forgotten bones. The gold roads are paved now. The silver veins are exhausted. The empire sleeps beneath parking lots and plazas, and you are tired. You have walked across centuries. You have been a dozen nameless faces in history's rear view. You never ruled. You obeyed. You bled. And now you rest. Spain lives on. Smaller, humbler, louder. You watch it from the margins. The bells ring. The flags flutter. The tour groups pass, and you fade, finally, into silence, because even ghosts get to sleep eventually. And so ends your journey through the rise and quiet fall of the Spanish Empire. If you enjoyed drifting through centuries of dust, gold, and ghosts, consider leaving. A like. It helps the story travel a little farther. And if you'd like to wander more forgotten empires, hear more bedtime tales of mud, plague, and history's quieter voices, you're welcome to subscribe. There are many more stories waiting in the dark. Until then, sleep well, and thank you for watching.